Hey folks, my name is Aaron, and welcome back to Major History. Last time we were doing a world civilization. Uh, I was going over my world civilization notes, I should say. Um, and today we're going to be talking about my Western civilization notes. I've had two classes in person so far, and I've read over my textbook, and these are some of my notes from the textbook. I decided to sort of split this first chapter into two parts because the first part sort of talks about, which is what we're going to talk about today. The first part talks about early civilizations, like as a whole. It sort of debriefs you on what to expect from that, which a lot of this is going to be like retreading some ground from my world civilization course, but um, a lot of it is new information too, so it's just reiterating on some stuff that you might already know. And next time, we're going to be going over some urban development in Mesopotamia and just like the Epic of Gilgamesh and the lamentation over the destruction of Sumer and Uruk, those two literary works. And yeah, but today we're going to be talking about early civilizations and uh, yeah, basically just recovering some ground that we've already covered in World Civilizations. If you're new to my channel, I am currently in college. I'm a history major, as the uh, channel name would suggest, and I'm deciding to share my notes for my classes with you because I believe that education should be free for everyone. And yeah, without a further ado, let's get into it. So first, we're going to be talking about societies of the Stone Age. Um, so as we talked about in World Civilization, in the first one, in the Origins of Humanity, we talked about this. Primates originate in Africa, uh, and they start to have human characteristics around 4 to 5 million years ago. And you start to get tool making hominids, aka Homo habilis, around 2 million years ago. And then all human culture before the fourth millennium BCE, before Common Era, or if you're a Christian, before Christ, is considered the Stone Age. So that's different from what my world civilization course has taught me. But this is the way it's written in the textbook. So anytime before the fourth millennium BCE is considered the Stone Age, whereas in my world civilization textbook, it would say that it ends around 3000 BCE. So just a difference there. So this is also directly from my last world civilization discussion, where we talked about the Stone Age and religious complexities. Uh, and this is just the timeline of the Stone Age, and you can see right here it differentiates between the two at around 10,000 BCE at the Neolithic Revolution or the Agricultural Revolution. So now we're going to be talking about Neanderthals who flourished. That is to say that they were living quite comfortably. They still had challenges. They were living around 200,000 years ago, and they're actually a little bit more advanced than you might think. They made jewelry, cave paintings, which you can see down in the bottom right there. Um, they were capable of speech, and they actually buried their dead with distinctive graves and meaningful objects such as tools or weapons or flowers, even sometimes. And they actually interbred with Homo sapiens around 60,000 years ago. And that's actually something that we discussed in part two of my World Civilizations lecture, is that one of the reasons that we think that the Neanderthals went extinct around 40,000 years ago is that um, they basically assimilated with Homo sapiens and basically created uh, the species of human that you know today. And now we're going to be talking about the migration into Afro-Eurasian and into the Afro-Eurasian landmass, which I think is just the Middle East. So new technologies led to better nourishment, and better nourishment led to migration. Pretty simple, right? Homo sapiens sapiens. The book doesn't really go too in depth with this, but Homo sapiens sapiens is the subspecies of Homo sapiens. It's like the species of common gorilla that you see today. It's gorilla is the is the actual scientific nomenclature for a gorilla. But yeah, so for Homo sapiens, it's Homo sapiens sapiens. And if I were to guess, it would be the result of the interbreeding between the Neanderthals and the Homo sapiens. But that's just my interpretation. I could be totally wrong. But this subspecies, who we are today, created finely crafted, more effective tools made out of stone. And they also made fish hooks, arrowheads, sewing needles, etc. etc. And around there's also a 30,000-year-old cave painting in France, down in the bottom right, so they were capable of that as well. And basically the basic patterns of human life, which at this point was hunting and gathering and certain religious complexities that you can mull over in part 2 of World Civilizations. I know I keep plugging it, but always be plugging. So our next discussion is the building blocks of civilization. And developments brought by climate change, i.e. immediately after the Ice Age, where the world was starting to warm up a little better and fertile ground was starting to not be frostbitten. Food production started becoming a more reasonable way of living around 11,000 BCE, which is the agricultural revolution, and it fostered settlements that could trade with each other, and it became possible for communities to gain and store wealth. So agriculture basically made it so that economy could happen, and certain groups resisted this, and these were groups that preferred to avoid hierarchy and decided to stay in their little hunter-gatherer groups, because that was what was comfortable for them. But for whatever reason, over time, these people would be considered lesser or barbarians, as we talked about in part 3 of World Civilization. And the next part of this is these changes, these agricultural changes, it created surpluses for some, where they were able to gain and store this wealth to live more comfortably, but it also created some unique challenges. One of these were birth rates were higher, and this might not sound like something totally difficult, but this also meant that populations were higher, which means that there were more people that you had to take care of and feed. And this also created some inequalities for the hunter-gatherer groups who resisted city life, and it certainly enticed them to assimilate into their culture. And it also created a gender divide, because with more births and more children to look after, women would end up specializing in childcare and taking care of their children, and men would end up leaving the family unit to specialize in different tasks. And along with this, with trade, and other certain things, with a larger population, more densely populated people, you have rapid spread of infectious disease, which these diseases were typically zoonotic, which means that they came from animals, and eventually increased birth rates would just make this not as much of a big deal. Birth rates would outweigh the losses from infectious disease. And some of the benefits of stable and predictable surpluses of food are domestic animals. You need predictable surpluses of food to take care of domestic animals. And with this, you get more meat, more milk, more leather, wool, bones, horns, for instruments, I guess. And animals would also allow you to have more animal power to pull carts and plows and just carry heavy objects from place to place. And you need predictable surpluses of food to maintain larger populations, as I said earlier. And this brings us to seasonal settlements, because with climatic changes are between settlements, sorry, with let me just. And this brings us to seasonal settlements and walled cities. So most cities would be walled to protect themselves from the outside world, whether that be flooding or engagements with barbarians from the outside. You needed to be able to protect your people. So there's that, and also seasonal settlements, which arose because of basically seasons. It got hotter or colder in some seasons, and a lot of times people would go to one place simply because of a religious institution and or a ritual of some kind, and that is the case for Göbekli Tepe, which was a settlement around 9000 BCE. Sorry for the lack of the tilde, and that was in what is today Turkey, and it's marked by ritual architecture. So you can see that these people, mostly inhabited this place, were either very religious and it took over their entire daily life, and it's marked by ritual architecture. And then there's also Jericho, which was around before 6800 BCE, and it is between the territory that is considered by many countries to be Israel in Jordan, and it's marked by stone foundations, including stone walls, and a tower, which is still standing today, which you can see here. Pretty cool. And they also had irrigation, pottery, and the pottery was used to store grain, wine, oils, stuff like that. And with stored agricultural surpluses, this created wealth disparity. So certain people had more stored up wealth or agricultural goods than others. And dependence on agriculture actually made it difficult to split from their communities. So people didn't necessarily know how to farm all that often, and they would be dependent on their communities to provide for them. This also created dependence on land and weather, so fertile land, and if it were raining, you would prefer to stay in your community or under a roof than outside, where it's wet and cold and sad. And this also, with the weather, became speculations about natural and supernatural forces, and some forces were believed to require services or gifts. This is like what we talked about, animism, where everything is a spirit, and certain spirits required gifts and services, such as rituals, sacrifices, and this eventually created spiritual leadership in the form of shamanism. And spiritual leadership was eventually allied to worldly power in this, and it's in this way that they led war bands, enforced labor or slavery. They exacted tribute or taxes or tariffs. They resolved disputes in their communities, and they established themselves as a ruling class, which is very important. Okay, and for the last slide, we have trade. And this is basically just a catch-all. This whole slide is just talking about what trade is. So by 5000 BCE, both local and long-distance trade routes were established, and luxury and exotic goods were the most frequent between communities. So basically things that a community did not have was what they would import. Crazy, I know. And this accelerated the exchange of ideas and information, which is very important. I can't think of anything off the top of my head except for triangular sails. This is way beyond the scope. But when sea battles were happening way later on, like 1500s, Certain communities would see one community would see a different community's shape of their sails, and they would see this and be like, wow, they are outpacing us, and they would decide to make that for themselves to even the playing field. So it could happen that way, or just by trade, you can talk about what's going on in your city, and they can talk. Ideas are spread this way. And social status was enhanced by ownership of high prestige goods, and which encouraged specialization to create these things, such as pottery, cloth, weapons and tools, building houses and fortifications, and other things like monuments and temples as well. And people who would facilitate trade is another thing, but it's at this point that we get what ultimately our society is built on. Just kidding. Elites who exploit the labor of others also become specialized, aka middle management. These are people who are speculators, organizers, people who would have enough leisure to engage in intellectual, artistic, and political pursuits. And yeah, I guess the conversation about that is over. So yeah, you have these people who are leaders, and they basically are the rich ones who can drive society forward, at least at this time. And yeah, so that's gonna do it for today's video. Kind of a short one today, but stay tuned for tomorrow, because tomorrow I'm uploading the second part of this Western Civilization series, and we're going to be covering urban development and the civilization of Sumer, aka Mesopotamia. We're going to be talking about the Epic of Gilgamesh, flood theory, or sorry, flood, yeah, flood myth. Thank you, guys. I knew you were telling me the whole time. So if you want to see that, I would consider subscribing and turning on notifications so that you're notified when the video is released. I tend to release my videos at around noon, Central Standard Time. And if you like the video, please make sure to like this video, because that helps a lot more than anything else, as well as for engagement. If you would consider leaving a comment, tell me what you guys thought about today's discussion and this video, and what you would like to see next, even though I'm following a very strict curriculum. I do enjoy making these videos and these slide presentations that I go through all the time. So if you wanted to see anything different for me to talk about, I would consider leaving a comment to let me know, and subscribing to see if I end up following your suggestion. So anyway, guys, that's going to be it for today. I appreciate you watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Okay, bye-bye.